Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We've got another great and powerful session for you. Good friend Emily Smith out of Cobb County 911, Georgia, tactical dispatcher, and just overall awesome person. This is going to be excellent. She's going to be doing a session called Coordinating Chaos, Navigating Your Own Personal Crisis. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you, Ricardo. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. For those of you who don't know me, Ricardo and I became friends. It's all Dawn's fault. I will always say that. It will always be Dawn's fault. I have to throw that in here. Just a little bit of how I came into meeting Ricardo was I actually met Dawn. And hearing how powerful Dawn's story was and going through a few of my own different things in life, I knew I wanted to share my story in different ways, and I knew that I wanted to be able to actually help others in ways that I knew that not many people could necessarily relate to. And she said, you need to reach out to Ricardo. So I reached out to Ricardo, and I literally put in there to go on his podcast, It's All Dawn's Fault. And I did an episode with him, and we've now become really good friends. And it's been great. So thank you for having me, and thank you for constantly supporting me, trying to ease my nerves. So coordinating chaos. I'm about to get pretty personal and actually sharing some of my own personal crisis story in time. So I will start with first who I am. I'm a dispatcher of over 7 years. I started in May of 2016, and I've been at the same center, a very large center, for the entirety of my career. Before I got into 911, I got into search and rescue, and I fell into that, and I've loved it. So I have been in every position kind of in search and rescue, but I currently am dogless, and I hold the position of assistant canine coordinator for the Georgia State Body Recovery Team. What that means is I pretty much dispatch or do any type of admin role for the state to coordinate any type of searches as needed. Now, I want to start by just letting you know I am currently in a hotel, about 6.5 hours away from my home base in Cobb County. My brother is in the hospital, possibly listening in right now, and I have been kind of jumping back and forth. So if anything, internet-wise or anything, sorry. But any background, I'm still in the hotel. I didn't think the hospital would want me to jump in and hang out with you guys in the hospital room. To further who I am, if you don't know what the Enneagram personality test is, I am an Enneagram 7, and what that basically means is I'm a professional adventurer, and I am an escaper of everything negative feeling, any bad vibes. I hate everything that feels negative. I will do everything to avoid it. That plays a part a little later on in this whole story. I am the lover of all sounds, and I have a little help to do so. Also, you'll hear about that. And I am my mom's dragon. And why that plays a part, I feel like that was needed because my mom and I are very close. My mom is my best friend. We have matching tattoos. The dragon part is really funny. I actually got that name during the course of what you're about to hear about. And I'll go into it a little more during that time period in a few minutes. But the dragon part, I asked her about it just the other day. Put into words that I can actually share with people. Why do you call me your dragon? And she said, you're extremely loyal. You'll the protector. Her words, and I quote, you take no bullshit. And you are fearless. You have no fear. You are willing to do anything for those you love. And why that matters, I'm about to get into. So in 2023, I challenged myself, and the whole challenge of this year was just one word. This word, this concept, it terrified me. It held me in shackles. And after talking to people from all different walks of life, I realized it held a lot of people in that same captive, lackluster life. Everyone was held in shackles, and in public safety and 911 specifically, it's very easy to get held in the same cycle of getting stuck. That whole concept is vulnerability. And as 911 professionals, it's very hard to be vulnerable. We have to be fearless. We have to be willing to put our emotions aside. And we have to be the stoic person for everyone else in our lives, whether that be on the phone, whether that be our family, whether that be anybody. We're the ones that everyone can rely on. And it got me thinking, what is vulnerability? Why can I only let so many people in so far and then I shut everyone out? So I started looking at definitions. And I've heard, as I'm bouncing in and out of the hospital this week, multiple people mention Brene Brown. So I'm going to mention her again. So this definition in this quote, vulnerability is the feeling we get during times of uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. And as 911 professionals, we get a lot of people calling at their most vulnerable times. We get a lot of those really dark moments for everyone else. We get a lot of that thrown at us. Why is it so hard for us to be vulnerable and let others in during those times? So this quote, I think, sums up a lot. I'm just going to read it because I can't even face it any other way. I can't, summarize it, paraphrase it. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing all our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And to every single caller that we have, we are the light in a lot of ways. And oftentimes we forget that. So to jump into the whole idea of my presentation, I guess we need to kind of define what a crisis is. And we deal with a lot of crisis situations, right? So the crisis can be different for everybody, and everybody has a different threshold of a crisis. So as I'm looking at different definitions, because I'm one, let's get the facts, right? These are some different definitions. A great time of disagreement, confusion, suffering. A situation in something or someone is affected by one or more very serious problems. A disruption or breakdown in a person's unusual pattern of functioning. More so, that disruption that cannot be resolved by a person's customary problem-solving resources or skills. And just so you guys do know, like I said, I got a text right before coming in here. My brother or sister-in-law may or may not be listening from the hospital room. I got to talk to them last night, and I actually got to go over a little bit of this presentation. And we really talked about personal crisis in a sense of the whole last 2.5 weeks, where my brother got a brain bleed out of nowhere, ended up in the hospital. They tried to life flight him. They tried to get him to a different neuroscience ICU. and the weather was bad. They couldn't get him there. Thankfully, they were able to get him where he needed to be. Complications here and there. He ended up having surgery yesterday. He's on the mend. He's doing well. But we got to really talk about that. And it was really great to explain or get to talk about, like, you can handle crisis situations and you can handle hard times, but there's that threshold. And it's when you handle those hard times and something happens that are just completely out of your problem solving availability. You aren't able to handle that. That's a crisis. Doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. It doesn't mean that it is a forever thing or that you can't get through it, but it still sucks. And I'm going to talk about another time that I selected that affected me in my 911 career that I think really shows, to me, a pivotal point in not only my life, but also where I wanted to go in 911. And it really ignited my passion in a lot of ways. So knowing what a crisis is, and after taking 911 calls for years, I knew what a crisis sounded like. But what does a crisis look like? Now, a few things that I learned during this time period is that a crisis doesn't have to be you on the floor unable to function. It can look normal. This picture was me in March of 2021. You will actually understand that a little more in just a few slides. I was sitting outside of a hospice nursing home, and I was waiting in the car while my mom said goodbye to her father for one of the last times. Before I go further on that, a few of the other things that I've learned. Everybody has a story to tell, and it's worth sharing. Everyone has a story to tell, and there is somebody who needs to hear it. And resiliency, everyone wants to throw that word around. Resiliency is something that everyone says to have, but nobody says how to have it. In this job, how many times have you heard you have to be resilient? But nobody tells you how to be resilient. And the last thing I'll say that I've learned is that people don't want perfect. They want honest. In the last session, you heard Doug talk about leadership. And my brother made a comment yesterday as we were going through this. And he said, you will follow a vulnerable leader so much farther than you will a stoic leader who wants to be perfect. I would follow someone who is honest and vulnerable over someone who pretends to be perfect. And that is something that is just speaks volumes no matter what career choice you choose, but even more so in 911. So as we navigate through this crazy time that I'm about to start, I'm just going to say, when I talk about 2021, I always say 2021 tried to take me out. It tried its best to do everything in its power to take me out. So I'm going to go through the first 6 months and then add a little extra at the end for you. So we're just going to start in the beginning. The story actually starts in December, the end of December. So I'll give you briefly a little bit in December. I was dating a guy that I probably shouldn't have been dating. I was warned about him. Watch out, don't actually date him, whatever. And he had some previous medical issues that seemed to have been resolved. We were talking about moving. He had gotten a job in southern Florida. I am just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And he was going to take that job. And he wanted me to go with him. And I thought, this might be a perfect time to start over. This might be something good for me. So I said, you know what, let's do it. And as we started figuring everything out, he ended up passing out at work. 2 days left. I guess 1 day left. We worked overnights, so he was ending his day, and he had one more day to go. So it was 7 a.m. and he had to come back in the next day, and he ended up passing out at work. I had just seen him, I had just gone home, and he had a meeting after work, and he texted me and said, "They're calling an ambulance. I just passed out." So I flipped my car back around, and I went back and picked him up. We went to walk into City Hall, and as we were walking, full uniform, he was a police officer, he passed out as we were walking right in front of me. So I was able to bring him back to. I took him that day to his cardiologist, and he needed to get a pacemaker. So I took him, went and got a pacemaker. So we went through all of the steps, doctor after doctor, driving across the city, all of that, and into January. I had picked out my future engagement ring. We had signed a lease on a house in southern Florida. I had interviewed and tested, and all but had signed the conditional offer for a new agency. I was excited. They seemed great. I had submitted my 2-week resignation into my current agency. Out of nowhere, with 2 days left on that 2-week notice, less than a week away from moving, I was broken up with out of nowhere. After basically taking care of him through all of this, being by his side through all of this, out of nowhere, his father didn't know, his best friend didn't, nobody expected it. And I had no reason why. It was just, I don't want you to move with me. I didn't mourn the relationship near as much as I wanted to. I mourned not living near the beach. I'm not sure what that says about that relationship, but in February, my canine partner, Otis, was diagnosed with a brain lesion. We noticed that some things were off, and I started taking him to different vets. He had a whole vet team. I don't know if you guys understand the gravity of "this dog was my life." You will in a little while. This dog had a chiropractor. He had a whole vet staff for him. He had a neurology team, and he went everywhere with me. So he had doctors, and after 4 doctors agreed he had a brain lesion, I just was going to enjoy my time with him. I don't know if you guys in different centers how you choose annual leave or your time off. We have to choose in like November, December for the upcoming year. So we actually just now are choosing our annual leave for all of 2024, like our scheduled annual leave. And because I was moving, I chose all of my annual leave in the beginning of the year. So that way, if I didn't move right away, I had time off to help him move. And if I did move, I didn't waste anyone else's time to pick, because I didn't want to take days away from anyone else if I was moving. And nobody takes time in the beginning of the year. They will all want the warmer months. So I was on the last day of my scheduled annual leave in the end of February. We got a phone call that my pap had had a heart attack. So I drove my mom 11 hours through the night to Pittsburgh. We got there, we got to the hospital, we saw him, and the next day he was put into hospice, or within the next few days he was put in hospice. Into March, I said goodbye to my pap for the last time. Now my pap Um, he was Superman. He was a firefighter of 50 years, and when he couldn't firefight, he became a fire police officer. So he was that old man standing in the middle of the roadway, directing traffic all wrong ways because he had to be part of that fire service. As long as I can remember, he had the scanner listening to all of the calls, the fire calls, going through, and a lot of it was volunteer up there. They had townships in where they're from. He had the scanner going really loud so he could hear because he didn't want to wear his hearing aids half the time. And that still went until, his funeral. And then even after his funeral, my grandmother still had the scanner on because she wanted to be close to him. Pap was so proud of what I did in 911. And in Cobb, we get to work in the Braves. So he went and he told everybody that he knew that his granddaughter worked for the Braves, and my family was big in baseball. So that was a big thing. And of course, being in Pittsburgh, you had your select teams, and his granddaughter was better working for the Braves. So losing him, we ended up in Pennsylvania for 2 weeks total. That is when I got my name Dragon, because my mom was a little worried about how family was going to be, because really my pap was like the glue that really held that side of the family together. And I basically told her, I will deal with anybody who has any issues. Whatever pap wants, you would have wanted, is how it will be. And I became Mom's Dragon. And she said that she had to keep me on a short leash, and that nickname has just stuck. So every time, it's now the Dragon. Now in April, I thought things were starting to level out. Otis finally certified at the state level for human remain detection. Otis had been, we had a rocky beginning. I had him at 5 weeks old. I did all of the training myself, and at a mere 19-year-old, I did not do things the best way. I listened to people who steered me wrong. I took him out of search and rescue. I brought him back, and I continued the training, but I questioned myself and my self-confidence. So it was a huge thing. Otis and I certified at the state level. We had our first search lined up. Everything was going great. His first search, I had to pull him. His vision started to go. He wasn't doing well, and I wasn't going to risk him getting hurt. So we got certified, but we couldn't search. And of course, in April, Telecommunicators Week, ice cream, goodies. Anyone from Cobb is here watching. The chairs were old. This was way back when. Don't come at me. Everyone makes fun of how I sit. So just a funny picture. I actually saw this in my pictures. I got a text message. Someone snapped this picture of me, and it says, "Ice cream gremlin being a gremlin." And they were making fun of how I was sitting. I can't sit still on a normal basis. But a little comedic relief in the first 4 months of what felt like hell. Going into May, 62 days after I lost my pap, on Mother's Day, my grandmother was found passed away in her home. So back to PA we go for another funeral, and to try to clean up my grandparents' house and to try to put things in order. Being in Georgia, my mom has 2 sisters in Pennsylvania. It's a little hard to try to get everyone together. About a month later, 3 weeks before he would have turned 6, I lost Otis. Now, when I told you Otis was special, we did mud runs together. Talk about the mud runners, the savage running courses and stuff. There's one that's literally geared around canines, and he loved them. As you can tell, the top left picture was actually the day I had to put him down. So far, going into the first 6 months, I did a lot of things not so right. I actually had a weekend trip with my best friend, Savannah, Georgia, scheduled the day after putting Otis down. And I figured I might as well keep it because I don't want to feel anything. So I took that weekend and I went and I spent time with friends and I drank and I just didn't want to feel anything. And I wouldn't say that I'm a huge drinker. I wouldn't say that I'm anything of the sort, but I didn't know how to cope. It was one blow after another blow after another blow. And the first month or two was bad enough, where my whole world was ripped out. I thought that I had my whole future ahead of me. I thought that I knew what my future was going to look like. I thought that I'm going to get married and I'm going to live on the beach and I'm going to start with a different agency. And for those of you who don't know about my agency, it went through a lot of turmoil and it's different now. It's got a different command staff now. So keep that in mind as I go further talking. It's not necessarily about anybody who is currently there or who hold any roles there now. But I wanted out. I wanted away from anything and everything to do with it. And I didn't cope well. I was so excited to get out. I shut myself away from my friends. I did everything to overstimulate myself to keep busy. I tried to make extra hobbies. I tried to say yes to everything that I could do. That Enneagram 7 in me, I would plan the next activity while I was in the current activity. I would schedule myself to try to work overtime because what else did I have to do? I tried to shut out all emotion and I literally became a zombie. I just was surviving. I threw myself into any distraction, into work as a distraction, into anything. And I tried to seek out validation in work, in personal life, in anything that I could do. I tried to take up more assignments to try to get recognized at work just so I could be recognized. I tried to keep myself put together so that I thought that I was worth it. I thought that because one person left me that I was worth leaving. I thought that because I was left, I wasn't worth being alone with. And I really let that just seep into my bones and become my being. And those around me, and I'm not talking about the friends I held dear, the one or two that really were my rocks. I'm talking about my coworkers. I'm talking about my supervision. I'm talking about those who mentored me in and out of work. How did they respond? They tiptoed around me, or they avoided me altogether. Nobody in my center reached out to me unless it was in passing or at shift change. I didn't get any text, "Hey, just thinking about you." I didn't get any, "I just want you to know you're loved." I'm gonna call Roxy out here because she was one of the first ones in the comments here. And she was the first one on one of my social medias who she heard about my brother, and I'm posting updates about my brother. That was exactly what she said. "My friend, you are loved." I didn't get any of that then. So I didn't think I was worth loving. I didn't think that I was worth even working next to. And if there's one thing about me, if you haven't realized in the last few minutes, is I'm passionate. I'm passionate about anything and everything that I do. And I don't know how to not be. So I thought that my passion was a problem and that my passion was not worth being around. So how I felt in my center was I could fill a chair, and they were happy to keep me, but only if we didn't have to talk about my brokenness. And I will tell you, even in that time, we did have a peer support. And I don't think that some of the people who are no longer with the department, but who were on my shift on the peer support, they never reached out. They saw my brokenness and they didn't know how to handle it, and they didn't want to reach out. They tiptoed around me or they avoided me. I didn't want to talk about my brokenness. I didn't want to do any of that, but I didn't want to be avoided because that just seeped even deeper in my bones that I was worth leaving, that I was worth nothing. But I could fill that chair. And Hannah's session, if you were there a little earlier, was really powerful. And she said a lot of things that I said, man, I really relate to that. And I think this video sums it up a lot. So if you don't know who Simon Sinek, I think is how you say his name, is, I want to just share this video and we'll talk about how that really set in 2021 for me.
I have a rule with all of my friends, which is there's no crying alone.
No crying alone.
No crying
Right.
alone.
Okay.
That if you are in a state where that level of emotion, if you start talking about something that you know tears are going to follow, you immediately pick up the phone and call me or somebody else. And there's no crying alone. It's just not allowed. And the willingness to allow someone to sit in mud with you is what it is to be human. I think it is the greatest honor. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, which is, when our friends are struggling, our instinct is to rescue them, to pull them out of the mud, to fix. And if you're the one sitting in the mud when somebody attempts to fix, even if it's well-intentioned, it is a horrible feeling. Just don't do that. You're making it worse. And what true friendship is not the desire to fix or pull the friend out of the mud who you really want to see out of the mud, but it's your willingness to sit in the mud with them, to get in the mud and turn to them and say, this sucks. And it's not fun being in the mud with them. You don't want to get in the mud with them. But you choose to get in the mud with them until they're ready to say, can we get out now? But you sit there with them. And that's a friend of mine who is one of those folks. I hadn't talked to him in a while. I called him up and be like, what are you up to? I haven't talked to him in a while. And he opened up, and it was intense. And I was like, why didn't you call me? He's like, I didn't want to bother you. And the way we ended the phone call is I didn't say, I'm always here. I took my go on sort of mentality. And the way we ended the phone call is like, listen, and he's depressed and he's in a bad place. The way we ended the phone call is I said, listen, don't be an asshole and deny me the honor of being there for you. Like, you have no right to deny me. Very teary day today. I have a rule with all.
See if I can get back to it now. Of course it did. There we go. So, sitting in the mud. And how good are we on that floor in that comm center during those hard times? Are we able to sit in the mud with our coworkers, with our fellow dispatchers, with our fellow officers, with our fellow firefighters or EMS personnel? We are in those trenches together. We are in that mud together. We are in that storm together. And we're so good at it. When we're not in that storm together in the moment, we are so terrible at being in the mud together. And we deny each other the opportunity to be there for one another. And one thing that I did terribly wrong is I allowed one friend to be there, or two, but that was it. And so my dispatchers that I worked with, they weren't in the mud with me, and that's okay. But I learned from it, and I learned that I never want to not be in the mud with somebody who may just need someone to sit there in the mud with. And two people during that time really made the most impressionable impact to me. One of them, during any type of, when anybody in public safety loses a family member for bereavement leave or a retired public safety official ends up passing, an email gets sent out. And this is a copy of that email. So in the beginning, it is, at the bottom, it's the passing of my grandfather, the notification of my PAP. So it was sent out on March 8th. And you don't see the date on the top one, but it was cut off. But the top one was sent out on March 18th, a whole 10 days later. And I don't know if you guys can see it. I couldn't, when I was looking at my phone, I couldn't see some of the slides as well as I wanted to. An officer that I had been like acquaintances with. We work overnight together, just kind of work acquaintances. That's about it. He sends an email 10 days later that I'm sorry I didn't catch this sooner. Condolences read, praying for you and yours. 10 days later, but he wanted to make sure that he knew, hey, if you need anything, like, I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm not going to say, like, anything of the sort. Just like, thinking about you. Wow. I'm not going to sit here and ask you how you are. I'm not going to sit here and dwell on it. Just condolences. Later, to become one of my best friends, we don't hang out like that. I couldn't tell you, we've never hung out outside of work. We couldn't tell you anything else like that. But he is one of those people that, hey, I need somebody to sit in the mud with. I call him. And he does the same. The only other person that I will say left such a muddy impact, I think we can use that term now and understand the meaning of it, and that it doesn't have a bad impact, a bad connotation there, is one of my dear friends. He had called me every day while I was in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to use that hashtag now, muddy impact, and he called me every day, and he, on his way home, So it was like midnight, which I work night shift, so that was nothing for me. And I was sitting up. One thing my pap and I always did together is we did puzzles together, and he had one that wasn't finished. So I said I was going to finish his puzzle before I left. And I did, except there was one piece missing we still have not found. So we printed out a picture of my pap and we put him there and said he's the missing piece. But as I was doing this puzzle every night, I got a phone call from my friend. And he didn't call to ask me how I was. He didn't call to do or ask or say. He just called to really just sit in the mud. And it ended up not being so muddy. It was a lot of laughing. It was a lot of joking. It was a lot of crying. It was a lot of everything. And those phone calls really just got me through in a lot of ways. And those two people, a simple email and a simple phone call, really just made such an impact of me during a time that I didn't know what side was up, where was down, where I was going, or how I was going to survive. So I mentioned earlier, everyone has said you have to have resiliency. And Ashley's my sister-in-law, for those in the comments, and we've been in the mud the last few weeks together. And resiliency. And again, definition, because I'm all about definitions, and I just want to know. I want to learn. I want to be able to really understand what I'm putting out there, or even what I'm going through. The definitions vary. The ability to withstand or recover from setbacks, adapt to difficulties, or just to keep going in the face of adversity. It's not about the going through, but it's about the bouncing back. And when I think about resiliency, I think about bamboo. Think about how much bend bamboo can withstand and then bounce right back. And how strong that bamboo is and where it can grow. That thing can grow anywhere. You can just bamboo along the side of the road and it's growing. But becoming resilient is different for everyone. And it's a continuous thing. You don't just become resilient and stay resilient. It's a continuous growing thing. It's your self-care. You've got to keep at it. So just when I think, hey, I can do this whole thing, I can be resilient, I'm doing okay, I'm settling back into what I think is normal, I notice my hearing starts changing. And if you heard my podcast with Ricardo, you know where this is going. I had my hearing tested at the county clinic because when you get hired, you have a pre-hearing test. A little bit of background. I was deaf as a child. Had major surgeries, had reconstruction, have my hearing back. Slight hearing loss, no big deal. I passed everything, I'm fine. Put it behind me, forget about it. Then I noticed my hearing's changing. I'm 5 years into this career and fall in love with this career and everything to do with it. And I know this is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people. I want to make an impact. I want to just thrive here. I'm working hard. I'm finally getting over the year that I thought I couldn't make it in dispatch. And what if I lose my hearing? When I get my test compared to my pre-hire test, they said it's bad. They said it's so bad that all of these levels, all of these different tones, you're going to need hearing aids. So I go to an audiologist. And what if I lose my hearing? What if I can't do my job if I can't hear? We just got a new director. I've met her like twice in person. What am I going to tell her? What am I going to tell my coworkers? That I'm just now feeling like I can actually be one of them again. I'm just now feeling like we're getting back from I didn't feel like I belonged to, hey, I finally realized maybe I do fit in here. Maybe I can make that difference. Maybe I am settling where I'm okay. But what happens if I go deaf? That's something that I knew was a possibility when I was, sorry if anyone's older than me, when I was old and like 50. Because when you're 5 years old and you get told that, hey, you might need hearing aids when, you're old, that sounds like forever away. You don't think of, at 5, you don't think of life after 10. And here I am, 26, and facing the reality that I might lose my career. At that time, we were we were, before the change in the different command staff, before the change in our center entirely, we weren't able to go to a lot of different conferences. We weren't able to go to see like the outside world in a lot of ways. I didn't realize there was a huge private sector of a lot of different things. I didn't know that there were a lot of places. There's a place for everyone in 911, not just under the headset. You get told that you wear a headset or you go to supervisor, admin, that's it. I didn't know, hey, there's all these applications. Hey, you're all of these things. And I didn't think anything of it when I was 5 or 10 because 50 was unreasonable. Now I'm 25 and I'm like, I'm trying to plan for everything. I'm trying to plan for my retirement. I'm trying to plan for all of that stuff. But it's about to get ripped from me again. So I go to an audiologist and I end up getting hearing aids. And so the picture is actually the ones that I have in my ears right now. And sometimes I have random colors underneath my hair. Usually it's blue. So I didn't get them to match my hair. I got them because they're fun, but usually they match my hair. But if you've ever seen the video of a baby seeing or hearing for the first time, that was me at 26. I bawled my eyes out and I got my hearing aids. Bless my director, because I went to her and I'm like, you may not know me very well. We've only had like 2 conversations. I'm probably going to need hearing aids. And I don't know what that means. And she just simply, okay, we'll figure it out. And so I got them. And it was a lot less figuring out than I thought it was going to be. But I did it. And I'm continuing to do it. And it's still a work in progress. But that just ignited my passion even more because that gave me a purpose. That was me actually thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Then one of the first slides that I brought you to was vulnerability. And this is a quote that I already read to you. But this specific part, embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love, belonging, and joy. Every department has their pitfalls. Every department has their issues. And every person has their vulnerabilities. For so long, even now, there are times I have my walls so far up, and there are so many people who don't know so much about me, for whatever reason that may be, on whatever side that may be. But I'm realizing this year, as embracing my vulnerabilities and the things that I've been so afraid to share, my hearing, some medical issues, this tragic time that I didn't want to talk about, that everyone saw me at my worst. That everyone I thought in my center literally saw me falling apart. And because they didn't want to deal with it, they just shied away from me. Maybe that was me. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I was avoiding them too. Owning my vulnerabilities I've allowed myself to open up and receive love, belonging, and joy. I've now, because I've embraced these, I now have these friends. I now have these opportunities that I never was able to see before. Hannah said it earlier, her whole session was named after it. You're gonna have your highs and lows. Sometimes things don't get easier. You have to constantly keep putting tools in your tool belt. You've got to get stronger. You've got to become more equipped to handling personal crisis situations. And as 911 professionals, we have to help people get through the worst times of their lives. We have a hard job, but we can do hard things. And I'm not going to be that person who does what everyone else does and says, hey, you have to have resilience, and not tell you tips that I had to learn the hard way. So things that I really sucked at and things that I have to continue to learn and remind myself. Give yourself a chance to feel hard emotions. For me, I had to give myself time to grieve for a life that I thought I was going to have, to grieve for multiple deaths, back to back. I had to grieve for everything, really. I had to ground myself, to get outside. And in a session yesterday, it was mentioned about hobbies and mentioned kayaking and whatnot. If you can ground yourself and get outside, water is even better. So we mentioned kayaking and boating and all of that stuff. There's actually a scientific reason of why that helps you feel better. Water, ocean, lakes, anything of that sort actually release negative ions that bring down your cortisol levels, makes you feel better. It's science, actually. And it's just really nice just to get outside, get fresh air, get blood circulating. But consistency. Set a routine. How can you set a routine when your whole life is chaos? Even if it's just one constant thing a day. Even if it's just, I'm going to wake up and drink my greens drink every single morning. And that is your one constant thing a day. I'm going to get up and go for a walk. Or on your lunch break, go for a walk. Or just keep something consistent. Set a routine. Reprogram your brain. You are your own worst enemy. Make goals, write them down, make a whole lot of lists. Crossing off tasks releases dopamine, which means you write really silly lists. Get out of bed, cross it off. It makes you happy. Make the bed, cross it off, makes it happy. Even if you don't get all of them crossed off, cross something off your list. Even just that little bit of reprogramming your brain, that you accomplished something. You still accomplished it. Hey, I brushed my teeth. You still accomplished something. Cross that off your list. It sounds silly, but it makes you happy. And I'm not sure who, Lori said in the chat just now, breathe in, cross it off, breathe out, cross it off. Little tiny things. Even if you don't think that you can do much of anything, you can breathe. You can do that. For me, who has a past of an eating disorder, eat one meal a day. That was something I had to do. I made sure that I ate so I didn't fall into old habits. Cross that off my list. That was one thing I mentally said, hey, I ate today. I did something good. That was one thing that I knew that I could keep myself in check with. Stay connected with people in and out of public safety. Don't be afraid to sit in the mud with somebody, but even more so, don't be afraid to have somebody sit in the mud with you. Don't be afraid to just reach out, even if it's hey. It's okay. Do not take that opportunity away from somebody to sit in the mud with you. That's very selfish to take that away from somebody. That might be what they need for that day. Moderation. Even the best things can become pitfalls in too large of doses. Even the best vitamins for your body can become problems if you take them in too large of doses. I mentioned, like I said, I don't typically drink like that. But as first responders, that's one thing that a lot of people will fall into. One thing that, hey, let's go out and have a drink. The more alcohol you consume, the less you sleep. And a lot of us have problems sleeping. So you go out to have a drink to go to sleep. But alcohol actually gets you out of REM sleep. It may help you fall asleep quickly, and then it keeps you out of REM sleep and wakes you up. And so when you wake up in the morning, you need caffeine, and then you do it and you end up in this whole cycle again. Moderation. Not going to help you in the long run. Exercise, even if it's just walking. Walking is the best. Even just getting out, even if you're able to get lunches, get out of the center. Take a walk. The best ways to release cortisol: sweat it out, sleep it out, or cry it out. Cry it out. You have to allow yourself to feel those hard feelings. And rest. Take your off days. I would busy myself in every single one of my off days, to the point that I may not have been working, but I didn't allow my body the time to actually rest and recuperate. My body was still in survival mode, and that just affected me even worse down the road. And if you have the start of resilience and you work towards resilience, how do we remain resilient? Set boundaries. Don't be afraid to take time for yourself. Don't be afraid to say no. Remember your why. I had to tell myself why I started this. And the feeling that I had when I first started it. That giddy excited when you first started, that first call, that first, hey, I did that well. You've got to remember why you started and remind yourself of that often. And accountability. Who can you trust to call or to call you out when you're not fully yourself? Can you call them out? And if you can't, how can you work on that? If you can't accept that they're going to call you out when you're not at your best, you've got to work on that communication skill, that receiving skill. If you can't call them out respectably and in that safe way, it's going to force you to work on that communication skill. Have those who can hold you accountable and hold them accountable too. And sometimes it's just plain self-awareness. You have to just call yourself out sometimes. I'm not at my best. I have to remove myself from this. And take a minute. Sometimes you just have to step out and take a minute. Resiliency is like handwriting. Each person's writing is different. Some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed. We're finding out recently this week that actually plays a way in your brain of how your brain works too, and how it's actually wired. It's kind of weird. Some people write in print, some people write in cursive. Some people's handwriting changes. I go from print to cursive. It doesn't matter how you write. At the end of the day, the goal is still a complete sentence. What does your complete sentence look like? And with that, your resiliency can change. What you might need for one situation can differ from a different situation. One of my favorite quotes, Chris Inman had said, when I had seen him speak. The parts of you that you didn't know you had, 911 can pull that out of you. I want to add on to that. 911 can pull the toughest, the strongest, the best parts out of you. And it can also pull the worst parts out of you. You get to choose. You get to be able to navigate where you want to be. And you get to choose if you allow others to help you navigate and correct course if needed. I always like to say I love the chaos. I love the shenanigans. But you get to choose if you can coordinate your own chaos. And you get to choose if you allow others to help. So with that, thank you guys for listening, for being so supportive. Ricardo, you would jump up here with me?
Well done. Oh, very, very. Oh, that was excellent. I hope you've been kind of watching the chat as well, man.
I've been trying to. You guys are, oh my goodness.
Hell yes. Thank you so much for joining us, for being a speaker, and you, as soon as you started talking, I knew the nerves were gone. Maybe they might have been there a little bit in the back, right? But but you did so good. And I was writing some of the stuff down. By the way, Simon Sinek, love that dude. Love me some Simon Sinek.
Yes.
When we were in the green room and you had that up there, I was like, I can't wait to hear what what it is. And just everything that you were saying, I just thank you, Don, for for bringing us together, and for you just being here for everyone, man. This has been excellent. I loved one of these one of the spots that you have on there. Excuse me, about people don't want perfect, they want honest, and that right there was deep. There was a lot of parts that you put out there that really hit home for myself and a lot of folks in here as well. As you can see, it's just the comments are just going and going and going. If you get a chance, you need to go back in there and read it. So thank you so very much for everything, for this message today. Just every session today has just been on point with everything. So thank you so very much. I won't take any more of your time here. I know you've got your family to get to as well, and very big well wishes and everything to your brother and the rest of your family, and especially you. But thank you for everything.
Thank you guys, all of you.
This has been amazing. This has been really good. For everyone who is here, I'm going to take you to the next session that's going to be coming up, and that's going to be with Heather Blaney, and she's going to be doing a session called ESA Dispatchers. And we'll see you here all in the next one.